everyone. First, I would like to thank KHL, specifically James King and Murray Pollock, for inviting me to speak today. It's a really great honor, but I can't help if they're actually having a laugh at me because it's no secret that I am petrified of public speaking. Like, Brett, I'm sorry, I only know half of what you just said because I was hyperventilating the whole time. So pretty much at the beginning of any speech, I let the audience know how nervous I am so they can lower their expectations accordingly. And also so that if anybody sees me shaking, please know I'm not having a seizure. What's really funny is all the advice I've been given when I let people know that I get anxious about speaking in public. Advice like, make sure to take up a lot of space on stage and move around. And I'm like, yeah, right, I have a death grip on this podium and I'm holding on to it for dear life. Another common piece of advice, picture everyone naked and make eye contact. Don't worry, I'm not doing that. But the only advice that's actually helped me, and it's not really advice, but more of an observation, is someone who told me that most people in the audience genuinely want the speaker to succeed and will therefore be pretty supportive. This really resonated with me because I feel like the same could be said of my career, which I figure is a good segue into my actual topic, which is not how Jen gets really bad stage fright, but is actually about encouraging women to work in the crane and specialized transport industry. That's quite a mouthful, so I thought I would shorten it to encouraging women, which is what I hope to be the theme of this discussion, but I want something everyone can remember, so let's go with ew. I don't totally mean that as a joke. It's actually quite appropriate because this presentation will have its ew moments. Let's start with the one that quite possibly brought me here today, one that I told James King about shortly after it happened. Last May, I was traveling to London for the International Tower Crane Conference. While going through customs, I was asked the usual, are you traveling for business or pleasure? When I replied that I was traveling for business, the officer wanted to know what kind of business. So I told him that I was attending a conference and he wanted to know a conference for what. I'm here for the International Tower Crane Conference, I tell him, and he goes, what? I'm here for the International Tower Crane Conference, I say a little bit louder this time. And because he still looks as though he can't process what I'm saying, I start mimicking a crane with my arms like this as I clarify, you know, that build buildings. So at this point, he's looking at me suspiciously, which is not ideal when dealing with a customs officer. And he asks me, what is it that you do? So I tell him that I run a crane rental company, and there's a long pause before he finally says, your dad's company. Please note, this is a statement, not a question. No, just me, I tell him. Oh, your husband. Again, a statement, not a question. Nope, still just me. He looks me up and down and says in disbelief, you have a crane company? Come on. And he starts laughing. And I'm wishing that I just lied and said I was traveling for pleasure. Now, this is going to be the only story I tell you like this because I think it perfectly summarizes the reality of my everyday given our industry's current demographics. And I don't need to repeat all of my experiences with sexism, whether subtle or overt, because I think everyone in this room knows that it happens. And also, I only have 20 minutes and I spent 5 of them telling you how nervous I am. The purpose in me relaying this particular story to you is more about intention. Because when navigating the challenges of being a woman in this industry and coming up against exchanges like this, I try to focus on intention. Does the officer intend me any harm in what he's saying? The truth is, most do not. The customs officer is hardly the first person to do a double take at my choice of profession. Because there are so few women in our industry, it becomes unbelievable. And that is the true reason I'm here today. I think that's a problem, and I want you to think so too. So I'm going to throw out some statistics. Women make up roughly half the world's population. They represent 40% of the global workforce, but in the US, they comprise only 9% of the construction labor, which was about average compared to other countries where this data was readily available. And in the specialized industry and the actual field where there are operators, oilers, drivers, et cetera, they represent 1% of the labor. So what this means is that women are clearly underrepresented. And this probably is not news to anyone here. I mean, look at the room. So why is that? Why don't more women enter the industry? Well, the bottom line is that we don't feel welcome. In a survey conducted in 1998, women in construction were asked what their biggest challenges were. The responses were not enough training, feeling isolated, discrimination, not having toilets or other sanitary issues, and lack of properly fitting PPE, personal protective equipment. Almost 20 years later, and these are the exact same issues being cited by women in the industry. Now get ready for another ew moment. When I first took over my company as general manager, we didn't have a women's restroom in the office. I'm not kidding. And to this day, my safety vest makes me look like I'm a little kid playing dress up. And when I go to job sites, let's just say I'm really grateful to have small children because I keep a training toilet in my car. And before that, I always had to have a giant Starbucks cup on hand. And as I was still nursing at the time I joined the company, I had no other choice than to pump in my car, which is incredibly inconvenient, uncomfortably exposing since the windows don't really offer much in terms of privacy, and most likely terribly unsanitary. These are very awkward things to have to discuss, and maybe it shouldn't be the case, but I'm even uncomfortable having to say them here and now to a room full of men. But the conversations need to happen with men because as it stands today, men are the majority of our industry, and therefore the ones who are able to drive change. So why should we change our workplace environment to be more accommodating to women? Well, we know there's a labor shortage. I'm guessing that's what Brett was talking about. And if there isn't labor to do the jobs, the emphasis will be less about training people and more about building technology to render people redundant, which means more jobs lost, which means a weaker economy. In the interim, it means poor productivity. This also goes hand in hand with the aging demographic, where many companies have operators and laborers well into their 50s who have either become physically limited or are close to retirement. And so even though the construction sector is one of the largest in the world economy with about $10 trillion spent on construction-related goods and services every year, the industry's productivity has lagged behind other sectors for decades. If construction productivity were to catch up to the total economy, the industry's value added could rise by $1.6 trillion a year. $1.6 trillion. The two factors cited as causing this lag are delayed adoption of technology and poor communication. So how can women help? I'm now going to have a little fun at my own gender's expense. Who's notorious for being super talkative, men or women? Women, right? After all, the expression, at least in the US, is chatty Cathy, not chatty Charles. And there is some science behind this. The most famous is the Lefevre study published in 2013, which analyzed the differences in the brains of men and women from birth to adulthood. A healthy baby girl is born with perfect hearing. Baby girls are fascinated by their parents' faces and expressions, and as a result, they learn to read expressions much sooner than boys. Baby boys, on the other hand, develop their hearing more slowly and are therefore more fascinated by the mobiles above their cribs, which in other words means boys from an early age are drawn to objects that they can manipulate as opposed to actually interact with on a personal level. Lefevre concludes that this is why women are better at playing to their audience's interests and why they are better storytellers as well as overall communicators. Sounds like a dream salesperson, right? Other studies support this finding and also add an element of nurture in addition to nature. Many researchers claim that women are more socially insecure and held to a higher standard than men, and that as a result, they've had to develop a more evolved or advanced method of communicating to be respected and ultimately heard. And I can actually support this finding myself in much less scientific study. I majored in finance in business school, and we were asked to take part in an experiment for a chance to win $50 each, which, when you're a poor student, is like $1 million. We selected partners, and in finance, just as in construction, there were very few women. So the only other woman in the class and I, we paired up, and each partner had to sit at computers in separate rooms. And we were asked to relay any pertinent information that we got to our partner through the chat function so that the other teams couldn't hear what you were saying to each other. We were then given pieces of paper with the information. Each partner had a chance to share the information with the other, and then we all had to take a test. Not only did my partner and I win, but we scored 100%, and the next highest score was 53%. They said they never had any team score 100%, but they also had never had an all-female team before. You see, my partner and I just typed verbatim everything that the paper said, whereas our male colleagues only relayed the information that they deemed important. The purpose of the experiment was to see how well instructions were relayed when different people got different information but were working on the same project, which sounds strikingly similar to how a job site typically works. Now, I'm not a scientist, but women telling each other everything would seem to work in everyone's favor here. So get ready for more science. Women are also strong multitaskers. There's a world-renowned psychologist, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. In his studies, he finds that men do 1.5 things at a time. Women, on the other hand, do 5 things at a time, while thinking about and planning 2 or 3 things more. Unscientifically, my husband and my male colleagues confirm this to be true. So hire women and watch the productivity skyrocket. Brain scans also show that women have a larger hippocampus, the area of the brain that is the center of memory and emotion. What this means is that women have the greater ability to remember every detail, both good and bad. Guilty. But being detail-oriented means that women have the tendency to review things over and over, to require order, and to solve problems. Again, all good things in our industry, especially when safety is at stake. And finally, as I mentioned, I studied finance, where the mantra drilled into us, other than buy low, sell high, was to diversify. A diversified portfolio represents less overall risk when everything's not pulling in only one direction. With investments, if you put all of your money into one company and that company tanks, so do you. If you put your money into other investments as well, it becomes less likely that they will all fail, allowing you to weather a loss in one area better while hopefully growing your investment overall. I've pointed out a lot of women's strengths, but men are not weaker in those areas by contrast. Instead, they have different strengths that are just as essential. In communication, men tend to get right to the point, whereas women take a more circular route. Women may offer more information, but when time is of the essence, being direct matters. Multitasking can be great in certain capacities, but it can also dilute how well any given task is being done. If men are focusing on only 1 or 2 things, it stands to reason that they are doing them really well. And men's brains are typically stronger when it comes to spatial awareness, which is a huge advantage in many jobs in our industry. All this is to say that there isn't a smarter or a better way, it's just different ways. But having those different ways can only give you a better chance of achieving your goals. Now, hopefully I've convinced you that you want to make your workplace more encouraging to women, so how do you actually do it? How do you encourage women, or ew? Well, first, start by hiring them. And if one doesn't work out, hire another. It sends a message that women belong. Make sure they have toilets that are fully equipped to meet their needs, preferably separate of men because ew. I've begun to see more and more dedicated porta-janes, as we call them, on job sites. I took the picture that you could see her at a job in New York City. It's the pink one, in case you couldn't tell. And make sure these bathrooms are equipped to meet all of women's needs. Providing sanitary supplies and receptacles are critical because healthy women in their prime working years have the tendency to need these things. It's completely normal, and women should never feel like it's not, even if it makes men go ew. Try to be gender neutral when talking about things. Signal person instead of signal man. Operated instead of manned. Shocking. Otherwise, it sends a message into everyone's subconscious that these jobs are only for men. Provide PPE that fits well, or as well as it can fit based on what's available in the market. For that matter, ask your suppliers to produce PPE that fits a woman's body. Poorly fitting PPE not only makes us look and feel ridiculous, but it can also be a safety issue. Hire women. If women see other women in a workplace, they will instinctively feel more comfortable and at ease. Build a culture that supports families, and this isn't just for our women, but also for our men. Offering family support to your employees has been proven to be more economical in that it increases employee retention, thereby reducing turnover and lost time in hiring and training. If you think about it, it typically takes at least 3 months for an employee to get beyond the so-called where's the bathroom phase. The rest of the year to learn and another year to master. Instead, have people work with partners and cross-train like crazy so that when people have a life event come up, work can continue relatively seamlessly. It also bears mentioning that today's generation is more into co-parenting than ever, and millennials are actively seeking out companies that provide more flexibility so that they being women and men, can be hands-on parents. It's imperative that we support this because equality at work will not happen without equality at home. Do not tolerate bullies. I've heard stories of men bullying women on the job site, but I've also heard stories of women bullying other women too. Neither should be tolerated. Most bullying stops when the bully is confronted. If they don't stop, get rid of them. They are toxic. Toxic to culture, but also toxic to safety, as this morning's speakers pointed out. I mentioned cross-training in my push for family leave, but it's also beneficial for another reason. Remember that with only a small percentage of the industry being female, most men either have no experience working with women, or maybe a singular bad experience from working with one woman that may then shape their perception of all women. By partnering people up, the happy consequence is that people get to know one another better. Ignorance is eliminated by knowledge. Negative perceptions are replaced with positive realities, and it fosters supportive relationships, both between and amongst genders. And finally, hire women. Women can't be what they don't see. Which brings me to this adorable slide, if I do say so myself. The first picture under that blanket is my daughter at 5 months old at ConExpo in Las Vegas. The second is my daughter at her first SCNRA event at 7 months old. The third picture is also my daughter last year when she was 3, proudly wearing my company's hat while coloring in her princess book. She loves cranes as much as she loves anything pink, if for no other reason than because she was exposed to them from birth. Remember that the world of children is shaped by the adults around them. For example, I know of a woman engineer whose daughter was surprised when she met one of her mom's male coworkers because she didn't know that men could be engineers too. I mean, can you imagine? Because even though I'm telling you to hire women, I know firsthand how hard it is to hire women. I go out of my way to hire women, but can't seem to find many who have gone down this career path. So introduce little girls to the wonders of construction and let them know that this is an option for them too. And to the hardworking women, both in and not in this room, I will say this. The expectations of you are simultaneously 3 times lower and 3 times higher than they are for your male counterparts. There are times when being the only woman in a world of men is distinctly uncomfortable in a way that most of us already understand all too well. But for every 10 disadvantages, there is always one advantage somewhere. From the very small, like there's almost never a line at the ladies' room at an event like this, to the very big, like women-owned business certifications that give us a leg up in winning projects. Don't be too proud to seize those advantages. And it is also my experience that for every bad example of a man you come across, there are 10 incredible examples of men who, like the audience wanting a speaker to succeed, are confident enough in themselves to want you to succeed too. Arm yourself with a sense of humor. You will need it. Be assertive, and above all, embrace your femininity. We don't need to pretend to be like men because we never will be, and that's okay. Because who you are is exactly right, and you are good enough. And I promise that you have a cheerleader in me. And to the confident men, both in and not in this room, encourage women to work in the crane and specialized transport industry. By doing so, you'll be increasing the opportunity for more productivity, better equality both in and outside the workplace, and a greater future for our industry. The ultimate goal is that over time, the perspective will shift to the point where seeing women in the industry will no longer be unusual, and everyone will be treated equally with no need for special groups. It won't be about men versus women and vice versa. It will be about people, plain and simple, working together, allowing their differences to complement the whole. Then we can turn something that's ew into a we. Thank you.